the reason I'm not anti-religion for everyone, right, is that a lot of folks I have encountered across my career span the spectrum of faith. You know, everybody from atheists all the way over to serious adherence to whatever faith they grew up with, and Muslim, Christian, um, Jewish brothers and sisters. And without exception, I've never encountered a person of any persuasion or lack thereof that I didn't see my idea of God in them. And for them, it was their grounding in their faith that allowed whatever that thing is that resonates with me to come out and resonate between us. That's why I wouldn't, you know, if you said, okay, you get to ban all religion, I wouldn't. I wouldn't want to. As problematic as it can be, I tend to attribute that more to the individual people and the decisions that
I
they
don't
make
need
as
to know
opposed
what's
to religion
beyond
itself.
space, 'cause heaven is a home that we create.
Take a deep breath in. Slowly inhale. Then exhale slowly through the mouth. Let it all go completely. Center yourself in this moment and welcome the next new breath with love and gratitude. Welcome, friends, to Divine Anarchy, a conversation about spirituality, humanity, and the origins of life on Earth. My name is Kayla Beard. I am a poet, a spiritual coach, a Reiki master, and a seeker of spiritual truth. We are here to talk about faith, religion, and the complex and infinite tapestry of individual beliefs that make up our human understanding of who or what God is. In these conversations, I allow the life coach and the reporter in me to link arms and explore the many different ways that spirituality shows up in our lives. I am thrilled to be here, and I am elated that you have elected to join me in this adventure. So thank you. Before we begin, I want to remind you to join the Divine Anarchy Substack. You can visit kaylabeard.substack.com to read the blog where I share my own personal relationship with spirituality and journal prompts to help you in your exploration of your personal spiritual practice. You can also visit my website, theharmonicspirit.com, to learn more about that. And I believe there definitely is a link to the Substack on the website if you go to the Divine Anarchy tab. This next conversation was very fun to record. I looking back now, I realized that it was very important for me as well. My guest is Delma Jackson III, a social justice advocate, a thought leader, a talented writer and speaker, and co host of the Dive in Justice podcast. I will include a link to his podcast in the show description. But I definitely recommend that you check it out if you are a podcast fan. I met Delma through work at an organization called Metropolitan Group, and I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to work with him. He is a very thoughtful person, a very inspiring person, and I'm so grateful that he was willing to take some time to talk about his personal experience with religion, the force that I call God, and the role that spirituality might play in his future. And there is a theme I've noticed when I speak to Black people about this subject. There is an unavoidable link between our Blackness and our spiritual identities, which I think is very interesting and important to acknowledge. And so, of course, we talked about that again in this conversation. And as someone who works in the social justice space and talks a lot about social justice in his work, Delma had a lot to say about the relationship between, his relationship to spirituality and his Blackness and his relationship to Black culture. So I hope you will find it very interesting as I did. For me, I always love learning about different perspectives on religion and spirituality. And I really do my best to approach each conversation with equal amounts of enthusiasm, but it is always affirming to speak with someone who has a similar understanding about what God is. So I was especially moved and inspired to learn about Delma's story, and he really helped me to put some of my own beliefs into perspective as well. So I hope that you will get some gold out of this conversation as I have. Before we get into it, I want to share that this podcast is sponsored by The Harmonic Spirit, a virtual hub for spiritual coaching, Reiki healing, and other resources to help you expand on your own spiritual journey and connect with spiritual seekers just like you. Visit theharmonicspirit.com to learn more about this podcast, the work that I do as a spiritual life coach, and more. I recently released an herbal tea blend to celebrate the fall season, and I'm very excited to share it. I've gotten some really positive feedback so far, and if you know me, you know that I love tea, I love herbs. I am an amateur herbalist, and I created this blend with a lot of intention and love. So if you're into that, you can order some of that on my website. And you can also learn more about me or order my books. You can take my free quiz to assess your current relationship to spirituality, or register for free Reiki sessions, which I host every Saturday at 11 a.m. Also, when you visit the website, you can download free journal templates from my book, Surreal Faith, and sign up for the blog to receive journal prompts in your inbox every week. Again, visit theharmonicspirit.com to learn more. And with that, let's get into it. All right, welcome, Dalma. Thank you for being here.
Of course, thank you for having me. Yeah, this topic is interesting.
I'm very excited. I'm very excited to
Mhm.
talk to you about it. Um, and I'm, in general, always excited to talk about this. um,
Yeah, for sure.
Before we get into it, is there anything that you want to let people know about you, just to kind of start things off?
Oh, I just assumed you had this dope like bio of all ready to go with special effects and like none of that, really?
I'm sorry, no.
All right. No, it's cool. It's cool. Um, I don't know. Is there anything in particular most of you guys have shared? Is there any format? No.
I'm still not sure how this format is supposed to be. Um, Everybody I've asked usually says, I don't know, nothing. So it's okay if you can't think of anything.
No, I could talk about myself for like I can take up your whole episode just talking about myself. That's easy. You know, I'm a dude. No, what to say? Delma Jackson, I know I've had the pleasure to get to know you through our work at Metropolitan Group, where I'm a senior director. Um, just over 2 years now, I've been at MG. Outside of that, I'm based here in Flint, Michigan, where I was born and raised. When I was did my undergrad in Afro Studies and Psychology at Eastern Michigan, grad school at the University of Michigan, again in African American Studies and American Studies. What else? What else? Raising um, two teenagers um, and a third son who's grown now and lives full time with his mom. Uh, mm, 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 mm. Yeah, most of my background has been rooted in some sort of social justice pursuit or another. Most of my adult life, starting with community organizing in Toledo, Ohio, fresh out of undergrad, doing that for a couple of years. Yeah, and then just kind of jumping from one thing to the next until I made my way over the metropolitan group. So yeah, I think those are the main highlights. But if you think of anything else, let me know.
Very cool. That
Mhm.
sounds like a pretty good full answer. I appreciate
Good,
that.
good, good, good. All right, I aim to please. I want to be a good
And it's
guest.
good for it's good for people to know, I think, who you are and where you are at right now,
Sure,
and how you got there.
sure.
Um, I
Mhm,
want to kind of go back to the very beginning of your understanding of spirituality
mm,
and how you were introduced to the idea of God, if you were introduced, like, what did that introduction look like for you?
mm, mhm. So I was raised in the Black church tradition here in Flint, AME Zion Church specifically, which is an old school Methodist denomination. So old school hymns, old school choir, none of that newfangled stuff that I ran into when I got older. Definitely old school. Yeah, the church community I grew up in was pretty tight knit. Um, Definitely most of the members had been there forever. So it had an atmosphere like, any adult could take on that parenting role. Um, for better and for worse, coming up. Um, and I'm sure the adults had their scandals or whatever, but none of that really came to my attention. I was kind of um ignorant of that. But yeah, and then from the time I entered kindergarten, it was in Catholic school. We weren't Catholic, but my parents thought that would be the best educational option at the time for me. So it's a private Catholic, predominantly white, wealthy school. And so I did that actually K through 12.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
So it was church on Sunday, mass on Wednesday, uh, pretty much my whole, yeah, like up until I left for college. Yeah, so my introduction started really young, and I had a lot of religion between the two.
It
Yeah.
sounds like it, yeah. And I
hmm
wonder, I'm not super familiar with um either Methodist or Catholicism. Is
hmm
there a lot of difference between the two?
Um, yeah, and I think some of that, so like in both instances, you have a pretty strict hierarchy, right? And I haven't been around the Methodist Church in a long time, but I think you still have like your bishops who make decisions at a regional level and things kind of go down, filter down from there. And obviously with Catholicism, you have your Pope, your cardinals, and on down, right? I think most of the difference had more to do with just the culture of the African American church that we typically think of on, my Sunday, and then on Wednesday, I went to a pretty stereotypically, white Catholic church, which means service is only 45 minutes and it's so quiet in there the whole time. You could hear a mouse piss on cotton. You know what I mean? It was like people catching the Holy Ghost on Sunday, and then on Wednesday, it's like a damn library. So it was really different in terms of how they worshiped. And that was something I picked up on very young. Yeah,
That's really interesting.
it
Um,
was.
yeah, I wonder, like, can you tell me more about how that influenced your interpretation or your understanding of what or who God is?
Two very different representations of God, although I will say in both instances, God was white,
Hmm.
right? Um, and I don't think my parents' church was necessarily, how do I say this? I don't think they ever thought of it. I don't think they thought about what representation meant in that way. Um, and so the old school materials that they have for, say, Sunday school, which I always had to attend, right? You're flipping through all of the books, materials they're giving you, and everybody's, white as hell. And so then you go to the Catholic Church, and obviously everybody's white as fuck. So between the two, oh, sorry, is this explicit or no?
Oh, it's fine. Yeah,
Okay, I curse like a
doesn't bother
sailor.
me. Yeah.
All right, cool, cool, cool. I didn't want you to have to edit a bunch of stuff. Um,
I appreciate you for asking.
yeah, yeah. Sorry, I asked after the fact, but yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, cool, cool, cool. Yeah. So God was white in both instances. I prefer to be in and out the way Catholics did. Um,
Like in terms of like the amount of time you spend in
hmm
church.
yeah, as opposed to Sunday school starting at 8:30, and you ain't getting home from church service until 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right? Um, Catholics is like the fast food of worship, and so um, I preferred that, and I also prefer some of the class-based observations I was making being in this wealthier white school. So honestly, I think the biggest impact it had on me, if I had to pull one out, I think in some ways it contributed to my internalized racial oppression. I don't think I would have ever said out loud, I want to be white, but in retrospect, I think that was something I wanted. Yeah,
That's deep.
right? It's pretty fucked up.
That's really heavy. Um, and it makes me wonder how the structure, well, h- how did the teachings of the church feed into that or counteract that for you? Or was that something that was kind of just in you in a more subconscious way?
Mhm. So, for the most part, I would say the two churches ran parallel. Um, my parents' church was not particularly, they did not have a particular racialized analysis to offer, right? Um, Nor did the Catholic Church try to. And so I think it was more for me a subconscious piece gleaned from the different things I was observing and not having anyone to process it with because I didn't have the language myself to even raise some of these concerns or observations to anybody, and nobody was explaining it, right? The economic conditions of my immediate surroundings. where General Motors is pulling out of Flint and the economy is taking a sharp downturn. There's a rise in violent crime. Um, and all of this is happening at an age where I'm playing outside. And so my desire to be a child overtook my desire to stay safe. And so I'm encountering a lot of violence simply because I want to be able to be a kid, you know? And then you go visit a friend's house and they have a much bigger home, nicer homes, nicer cars, quieter neighborhoods. Nobody's explaining like redlining and federal housing policies. And so I'm coming to blame um, myself and people who look like me, you know. School is teaching me that America is a meritocracy, and if you just work hard, you can have whatever you want. So that must mean my parents are lazy. The people in my community are lazy. And there was nothing coming from either church that was going to address that in any meaningful way. So, yeah.
Wow. Okay, that's really deep. And it makes me want to kind of take this conversation in another direction. So I'll just kind of come back
Mm-hmm.
to, um, can you talk more specifically about what kind of thoughts you had about God, um, during those times? Like, do you feel like you had a relationship with God, or what was that like?
Yeah. Yeah. Something that appealed to me very early on was the idea that I could somehow enact um, God's love and mercy on earth. From a very young age, I think I was always kind of tuned in to something that felt, in retrospect, spiritual. Again, didn't have the language for it. Um, but yeah, I think I was always drawn to, like, I remember really wanting to do well in Sunday school. I remember finding it really interesting, more so than church service, just really being able to dig into um, the stories that were being covered and what they said about people. Um, and really kind of taking some of those lessons to heart. Now, mind you, I'm still a kid. I'm definitely not running around like a little priest or anything. I'm still getting into stuff or whatever. But there was always something there that resonated with me, and um, that would develop in me over years and years. But at a young age, um, I just remember feeling like I could do good, and it felt important to me to try to do so. Um, More so than wanting my parents to be proud of me, I think I wanted God to be proud of me. Yeah.
Interesting.
Um, and it didn't feel, honestly, it didn't feel connected to the religion for me. Um, like all of the rules never made a lot of sense to me. You know, it felt superfluous, but there was something about the idea of being able to do good that resonated. And so I think that was my idea of who God was.
God is good in
Yeah.
that like moral way.
Yeah, exactly. Hmm.
So I wonder, when you think about where you are now,
Hmm.
how has your understanding of God changed, or
Hmm.
has it changed
Hmm.
since that time?
Yeah, it's definitely evolved in some ways and grown in complexity. Um, I left Christianity while I was in undergrad. As I became more politicized and realized how much Christianity was a tool of white supremacy, I have found myself really getting turned off to the religion. But what actually did it for me wasn't rejecting the version of Christianity that I had been encountering. I think what did it for me was in trying to take one foot out of the religion, it landed in me beginning to really explore a lot of other traditions, um, major faith systems, for instance, Buddhism, Islam, Judaism, um, yeah, etc. Um, through African American studies, beginning to encounter Yoruba for the first time, and really engage with some of that. Um, and it was the through lines. It was no particular faith system that really spoke to me, but what stood out was the commonalities. And it made me feel like Christianity was just one dimension of a much larger picture. And that's what actually pulled me out of the faith. I didn't want to feel obligated to this singular, narrow idea of God. Um, and religion in that way began to feel like it was tying me down. So I didn't want any religion. And I've been that way ever since. Um, so yeah, since 20 years old or so, I'm 45 now. So yeah, about 25 years now, I've been just dipping and dabbing in a little bit of everything, including, still picking up the Bible as well. Um, once I got over my initial um, judginess, when I first left the faith, I think I was like, oh man, y'all stupid being in this faith. You know, I was all
I
zealous
feel
and
that.
shit, right? I was hella zealous and judgmental, but I calmed down. Um, and began to re-explore the wisdom in that book, apart from the dogma that often comes with it. So, yeah. Um, so my idea of God has gotten a lot bigger. Um, I
Do you mind?
think, mhm,
Sorry, I don't want to cut you off, but I do want to zero in on what you're saying because I
mhm,
think, one, because I relate to it from my own experience coming out of Christianity and
mhm,
a very specific kind of rigid way of thinking. Um, I understand what you're saying about, sorry, I understand what you're saying about God being bigger.
mhm,
Um, and I wonder if you can kind of describe where the limitations are when you
mhm,
look at Christianity or any religion. Like, how is it limiting?
mhm, mhm. Yeah, I think spirituality should be an extremely intimate process, journey, whatever word you want to use. So much so that what is true for one practitioner should be unique to that practitioner, ideally, right? So I think religion is a understandable platform to launch one's self into exploring something. But depending on what a person's needs are, because I don't want to universalize my experience any more than I want religion to universalize theirs, right? So this isn't
Right.
a
Yeah.
knock on people. This isn't a knock on people who are part of a religious community because I think we're all having different needs at different times in our lives. And what I needed was to, religion began to feel like training wheels in a lot of ways. Um, And I just needed space to be able to be free of that and have a little bit of spiritual chaos and anarchy in my life. Um, and so getting rid of religion gave me the space to do that. And so um, that serves a specific need that I had. And if I ever decide I need the community that religion provides or anything else like that, I don't want to be rigid and refuse that calling if that ever should come up for me. But for now, it's just not what I need. So, yeah. Does that answer the
I feel that.
spirit of your question?
Yes, and thank you for clarifying that.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I When I interrupted you, which I probably shouldn't have done,
Oh
you were
no.
talking about um seeing God in a bigger way now.
Mm,
And I wonder if you can talk more about what your relationship to God now looks like, or how you experience God.
mhm. That's a big question. But why have a podcast if you're not going to ask big questions, right?
We try.
Yeah. No. Well done. Well done. So I'm of the belief at this stage of my life that God represents the profound and the profane. Um, I don't think you, how do I say this? I think if God is what you're looking for, you cannot help but run into her, right? Um, I don't think there's anything else. And so I say this coming from the full knowledge that my life experience has in some ways left me with a very strong sense of overall safety. Like I've had to navigate moments of danger and moments of discomfort, moments of um, a lot of things, but it's never been so consistent that it shattered my sense of overall safety. And so I think what God is to me is informed by some of those privileges that I walk with, you know, my masculinity and the way it's expressed, and the sense of safety that comes with that, my sexuality and the way it's expressed. Like I can go on and on and on. So I understand that's a very spoiled perspective to take. Um, but it is what it is. It's mine, and what that means for me is that I don't think I can offend God in anything I do, um, which is very freeing sort of approach, right? I don't have to feel ashamed about anything that I want or anything that I do. And simultaneously, I'm always called into account, which is not the same thing, right? I'm never shamed, but always held in loving accountability. Um,
What is the difference between those?
mhm. Yeah, so there are times, and I mean all the time, where I'm not necessarily living into the expectations that I set for myself in terms of the values that I want to hold and how I want to show up in the world. I fall short all the time. And I think what spirituality and my understanding of God is now is one in where ideally I get faster and faster at noticing when I'm stepping outside of my values And then I'm just gently calling myself back into them as opposed to shaming myself for falling out of them in the first place. Right. Um, I don't have to beat myself up when I don't do the thing that I feel like I should have done. I need to apologize where appropriate and try next time. Um, but I get to do that without limit. Um, and so, yeah, I really want to get this right. I still want to be that good, person that I wanted to be when I was 5. Like that part has never shifted in me. I want to be of service. I want to do a lot of good in the world, but I'm going to fuck up. I just will. I'm going to want things that my old school religions told me I shouldn't want, right? Um, I like my fornication. I like my drugs. I like my alcohol. I like to, you know what I'm saying? Like there are times where I want to turn up. And one of the most spiritual experiences I ever had, I was living in Amsterdam, high as hell and drunk as fuck, right? And so in my mind, there's no escaping God. There's no place I can't go and still be in communion and still um, be for someone else what they may need me to be in that moment, right? And when I fall short, yeah, just be like, okay, I could have done better. Let me try that again, you know. And if I need to apologize, let me do that. Um, yeah, yeah.
Does that, it sounds like a kind of freedom
Mm,
that you're talking about, which I can relate to as well. Like this idea that you, the idea that you're given in the Christian world is that, you know, you are inherently evil in a lot of cases,
mhm,
and nothing you do will ever be good enough
mhm.
unless you just kind of accept whatever they tell you, whatever version that they tell you you need to accept.
Yeah.
So, um, is this like what you were talking about when you were talking about needing more freedom? It's
Mhm.
like, do you feel, I'm trying to figure out how to say this
Take your
in a
time.
way that is not offensive.
You won't offend me, I promise.
Do you feel that um Christianity kind of set the tone for what religion is, or have you kind of decided based on your own studies that all religions are kind of limiting? Do you know what I'm saying? You know?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, I do. I think it's my understanding, and I'm talking as someone who has not looked at this carefully since grad school years ago when I took a comparative religion course. Um, so I could be getting some of this wrong. I'm under the impression, though, that with the exception of some of the Eastern faith systems, uh, Taoism, Hinduism, right, wherein there was sort of this wide acceptance of various worldviews that just kind of got taken under the umbrella of these religious communities, right? Whereas the Western faith systems like Christianity, Judaism, Islam, to a degree as well, I think, have long had more close ties with the politics of their day, right? And so there's a social dynamic that means creating more systemic rules, right? Because you're using the faith system as a means of social organizing, right? So it ends up getting into all kinds of stuff about everything from what materials you're supposed to wear to who you can marry to, fill in the blank. Um, And so I kind of see that cutting across the major faith systems. Um, and not to be flippant about it, but it feels like, yeah, the more strict the faith system is, the more adherence you have. You know, people don't do well with spiritual anarchy. um, and our
That's
political
interesting.
system doesn't do well with spiritual anarchy. You know, yeah, yeah.
What do you mean by that when you're talking about the political system? Are you talking about the US political system or like politics kind of in general, like globally?
Yeah, I think globally, like in places like the US, in places like the Middle East, you will always have the diehard communities that will leverage their understanding of faith in ways that allow for more social control, right? Um, and policy gets passed rooted in religious doctrine. Even in a place like the United States, where there's supposed to be a separation of church and state, I would argue that plenty of laws